today, Jack Smith making a new pitch on behalf of the DOJ on why Donald Trump must be put on trial before the election. If that sounds like a familiar issue, just remember Jack Smith has more than one case against defendant Trump. So the defendant was actually down in federal court today watching as DOJ prosecutors argued for a July beginning to a trial in the other Jack Smith case. Earlier in the week, we were discussing the big coup case and the Supreme Court slowing that down. This is the classified documents case. You probably remember both. And they are saying over at the DOJ that there is nothing in their rules or precedents which prevents this trial on the documents from occurring in weeks, even days before the election. And remember, it's Donald Trump as a defendant who has been delaying both cases. Now, on the flip side, I want to tell you Donald Trump's team are saying, well, they don't like the idea of this trial happening at all, but they offered August as the possible date. We learned about that new development last night, if you happen to be watching The Beat, because it came through in a filing, and that was a change. Now, today in court, with Donald Trump sitting there, we saw all of this play out at the hearing. Here's how the New York Times put it. One possibility, accounting for the switch in the Trump legal team's strategy, is that Trump's lawyers were, quote, seeking to reduce the chances of there being time for that other Jack Smith case, the election case, to go to trial before Election Day in November. So there's a lot of uncertainty here. You have, of course, a range of possible cases. Those are the two Jack Smith federal cases. There's also a possibility of a Georgia RICO trial. Today, the judge there heard more arguments about whether or not there is a conflict that should remove the DA, Fani Willis, from that RICO case. Then you have Trump's legal problems in New York. He goes on trial in the hush money case this month. We're in March now, so that's coming up. And in just a few days, he has to start paying some of the hundreds of millions of dollars that he's racked up in penalties from the other cases. These 4 criminal trials are more than any president has ever faced, but the civil cases are having a huge impact on Donald Trump. I want to walk through some of that with you tonight. Indeed, I will tell you straight up, some of this news happened over the course of the week. Here we are Friday night. It's been so busy, we haven't done a deep dive on this. But the clock is ticking because Trump is struggling to even come up with part of the cash for what he owes in those fraud cases. He basically revealed this week that he won't or can't pay the $500 million judgment in the fraud case in New York. His lawyers put it like this. It would be, quote, impossible to secure and post a complete bond. They say he might have to sell property to pay this penalty. Now, that is them claiming he doesn't have the money. Either they're telling the truth and he doesn't, or they're trying to deceive a court about his money after a case where he was found liable for fraud, which is deceptions about money. That would be a bad look, to say the least. All of this is a blow to someone who's talked a lot about being the king of debt and now can't even post a full bond.
I'm the king of debt. I'm great with debt. Nobody knows debt better than me. I've made a fortune by using debt. I like debt, for me.
Now, he likes debt. And in business, there are ways, of course, that sophisticated investors and entrepreneurs can use debt. He stands accused of fraud and other things, the misuse of financial machinations, but other people have done it effectively. I'm going to show you something, but I just want to put the context out here. If a truly multi-billionaire person were facing this type of legal problem, say Elon Musk, they wouldn't be haggling with the courts about a partial bond or delaying putting up the money. And to be clear, and in fairness to Donald Trump, like any other defendant, you are allowed to put up a bond and appeal the case, and maybe the total amount will be reduced. Maybe the whole thing will be reversed. But Elon Musk wouldn't have a problem putting up this bond for the purposes of appeal. That's what we're talking about. And not only that, but Trump's problems this week, where his lawyers are saying, we don't have it, we'd have to sell property, we don't have that kind of money lying around, directly contradict what his lawyers said as recently as last week about Trump's supposed net worth.
This guy is worth a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars.
I mean, he does. Of course, he has money. You know, he's a billionaire.
Unfortunately, they picked the wrong guy to pick on, in my opinion, because he's strong, he's resilient, and he happens to have a lot of cash.
He happens to have a lot of cash, except he doesn't. Again, there's a difference between what they say on Fox or in public and what they have to say in court. And even if he's been effective delaying certain things, this is where the rubber meets the road. Look at this statement from Trump's lawyers. Properties would likely need to be sold to raise the capital. In other words, they don't have it, whatever the other lawyer who you just heard from last week said it was not true, according to the lawyers now. Now, the Attorney General is not going to just let Donald Trump slow walk all of this or lie about it in public. Her office has already put his team on notice that Trump all but concedes he has insufficient liquid assets to pay to satisfy the judgment. Under New York law, that means James can go ahead and seize things. For example, bank accounts, take control of properties. Under the law, when you lose this kind of fraud judgment, if you defy it, well, it becomes a matter of what the Attorney General is willing to do. And she's been vocal about her intent.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets.
That is a big warning. And so on a week where Donald Trump got some good legal news from the federal side in the Supreme Court, he's now facing a lot of bad news, which affects his business empire and his money. And we know this also affects potentially his campaign, because he's been taking funds that otherwise would go to political activities and campaign activities and routing them to cover his legal bills. So it's all related because of him, not because of the Attorney General. These are his bills to pay. So in this campaign, at this crucial moment, Donald Trump has admitted through his lawyers this week that he can't pay up, that he cannot even get the money to pay the full bond. I mentioned Elon Musk as one comparison who's had litigation and paid out certain things, but a lot of people have dealt with legal problems and had to pay for bonds. In fact, it's something that people with legal experience talk openly about. Take 21 Savage, who said, I wear shades so they can't see, and I pay them lawyers and the bond fees. Thousands. I'm beyond G. They still asking, can you front me? End quote. 21 basically drawing a contrast between people who need to be fronted and people like him who can afford their bonds. And apparently, that's something Donald Trump can't do. He would have to pay this bond, by the way, through a premium fee to a company, and that could be about 3% of the judgment, as the New York Times explained. Companies offering appeal bonds, though, might be unwilling to take Trump's property as collateral if a building already has a mortgage or basically has other creditors already in line ahead of them. And Trump has not just the fraud fees, which, as I said, can still be litigated. Maybe they'll be lowered, but look at that. That's the $355 million is just the fraud judgment. The bond I reference is only for that, plus $100 million in fraud interest, plus those lawyer fees, some of whom he's passed on to his donors, plus the $83 million you see up top from that defamation loss. And we're tracking that as well. Ms. Carroll, who beat him twice in that case, says she now has serious concerns about Trump's cash position and the feasibility of collecting the payment. So we've got someone who's spent decades saying he has all this money, has lawyers last week saying he has all this money, but recent developments give rise to those concerns, as she writes in a filing. Now, Trump tried to barter with the judge on the fraud case. Again, I mentioned we didn't get into this all that much detail this week, but at one point earlier this week, he said, well, what if instead of putting up a $400 million that I owe, what if I gave you a $100 million bond instead of the full amount? That's not how things work. So very quickly, the judge said, no, you lost. This is not a negotiation. This is not a thrift store. And this is not some real estate deal like the ones where you were found guilty of some fraud. You owe the bond to cover the entire amount. Now, as we end the week, we were trying to take this all in and think about these comparisons. Donald Trump can't pay his bond. Donald Trump went in court in broad daylight this week and admitted that and then said, what if I gave you, what if I gave you a quarter of the bond? And the judge said no. We are approaching a Baroque era of a potentially seemingly Baroque real estate mogul that has more in common with comedy than traditional lawyering.
I scanned your food and it comes to $1 gazillion.
Elmo has a T-Rex and a Go Fish card.
I'm a baby. I have no money.
You owe us $200.
I can pay you in blocks.
You're not a baby, you're a man!
What's this? Bubble money.
I do want to make sure you get the invoice.
This is a little much for me. Maybe I'll just give you a fourth of the invoice.
Maybe I'll just pay you a quarter of it. That might be some Real Housewives stuff, and it might be funny in other contexts, but the judge saw it obviously as no laughing matter. That someone who claims to be so rich and is running to be president, just said, I don't have it. Could I give you a quarter of it? That's where we are in the New York case while Trump is in court on the federal case, and a lot of other trials may or may not happen this year.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the double. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I was so damn good on me, let us know.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark. General! General! We need to evac immediately. Evac.